All right, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Grand Reckoning. We have the great Scott Horton, friend of the show, on to talk about what's going on in Iran. It looks like Donald Trump has been led by the nose into this war as well, according to the talking points from several officials inside the administration. And it seems that they're already talking about the missile interceptors becoming an issue and we're seemingly running low. What do you know about that there, Scott?
Well, there are certainly many reports, even from the Wall Street Journal and so forth, about the ratio of their remaining missiles versus our interceptors. But of course, our B 2s and B 52s are bombing their missile stores. So it's a race to see whether our side can destroy whatever missiles they have left before we run out of interceptors. And there's a pretty big gamble that they took. This is one of the reasons why the Pentagon told W. Bush not to do it back in 2007. And it's one of the reasons we've been saying since then, and even before then, that you're taking a huge risk when you do this. That we have all of these bases. I mean, at that time, we had 150,000 troops in Iraq and 50,000 in Afghanistan. And in Iraq, they were embedded with the Shiite forces. So that was a huge risk at that time. But still, we have bases and troops in Erbil and near Erbil in Iraqi Kurdistan in northern Iraq, as well as in Kuwait, in Saudi, Bahrain, Qatar, UAE, and Oman, and $1 trillion of economic targets all up and down the Persian Gulf. And we can't defend them all. And Iran can reach out and touch them all. And as we've seen, they have gotten, for example, this incredibly high tech, like one of the centerpieces of America's ballistic missile defense system for even global ballistic missile defense base there. And the Iranians took it out. They overwhelmed it the anti-missile batteries were able to shoot down many in a row until one got through. And that was enough to take this extremely expensive and important, they even say like crucial to America's, instantaneous electronic intelligence about incoming missiles and rockets and calculating trajectories and all of these things. This extremely important radar system has been destroyed there. So, and it's on the front page of the New York Times today that they have reached out and touched bases in exactly like in my warning this whole time, all from Iraqi Kurdistan in Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, Saudi, UAE, and Oman, all the way down there, hitting the economic targets, the five-star hotels, and they've hit I think one refinery and a couple of oil platforms. They only had to hit two ships to completely close the Strait of Hormuz, which they're not going to mine it. They don't need to mine it. They just have to threaten that they'll hit any ship that goes through there. And so, it's funny because you can still see hawks on Twitter saying, well, what would have to happen for you to finally admit that this was great? It's already a catastrophe. Are you kidding? I mean, we can seriously thank our lucky stars, seriously, that they're not targeting our barracks and trying to kill all our guys. And our guys have mostly been evacuated from those bases, which just goes to show they know they can't protect them. So they're targeting equipment here. The casualties so far have been low, thank goodness. I mean, 6 is a lot if that's your family member over there. One of the it was a bunch of reservists that got killed in the first strikes there, and one of them was a mom. And I saw the quote from her husband saying they were so worried about her over there. And because they knew of the threat of incoming missile attacks, that they dispersed everyone out to separate small little stations on the base, put her in a trailer with no defense whatsoever, just so that everybody wasn't in one place. So it's just insane. The American way of war is just insane. But anyway, so they knew that this was a gamble, and it is a huge one. And look, I don't think anybody and no serious analyst anywhere in the world underestimates American B 52s and B 2s ability to obliterate targets that they can see and drop bombs on. But as far as hidden silos and hidden hangars and basements full of drones and whatever that, they've been manufacturing over however, long period of time, all of that still remains out of reach. I think the Iranians have been planning this for a very long time, and they know that they got to dump all their old stuff first and try to wear out American defenses and then hit them with the big stuff later. I mean, we already saw footage of, well, you know what? Maybe I shouldn't repeat this because I don't know how verified it was. I saw what I believe was credible reporting of a hypersonic missile hitting Tel Aviv, just one. which I'm not saying that's all they got, but it seems like they're signaling that we have these and you cannot shoot them down. Um, you got to be very, very careful about footage in this day and age, though. So I don't know. I put a caveat on that, but I'm fairly certain it was a credible report and footage there. Um, but anyway, so I guess we'll see. They haven't picked a fight with the American Navy yet. The Navy says that they sank with a submarine. They sank an Iranian destroyer of some kind or battleship of some kind. But they have not targeted, and maybe our Navy is at standoff range where they can't reach us out in the Indian Ocean there or what. But they're being, somewhat judicious. It's not like they're launching every last thing that they got to try to, inflict absolute maximum damage. So we got that going for us. But what the Pentagon told W. Bush in '07 was, we don't have escalation dominance. Can America defeat Iran in a war? Yeah. But at what cost and at what scale? Can we control events on the ground from planes in the sky? No. Can we find groups on the ground to overthrow the government that actually can do that? Kurdish commies or Peshmerga or Baluchi bin Ladenites or, whatever other, monarchist mercenaries or whatever. None of these people are going to be able to do a regime change there. No one really believes that they can. So they really have just stepped onto this path and they have no real exit strategy. The old Caspar Weinberger, that was Ronald Reagan's Secretary of Defense. It was the Caspar Weinberger, Colin Powell doctrine. Powell at that time was still a general and it was the national security advisor. Or maybe he was temporarily not a general and was the national security advisor before returning to the military as chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. But that doctrine was meant to prevent Vietnams. And what it said was, number one, you don't go to war at all unless you have a plan for victory and to get in and get out, an exit strategy. And then on top of that, it better be quick. It should not be, well, it's going to take a long time, but then we're going to figure it out. And we're going to get out there and our exit strategy is going to kick in 3 or 4 years from now. It's not a good enough strategy if it's going to take that long and the American people won't stand for it. So no. And then that was the other thing was you have to have the American people united behind the war. It ain't fair to send guys to war when they know the people back home don't support the mission. Because you know how they do in the propaganda. They always conflate support for the mission and the politicians' decisions with hopes that the men are safe. You know what I mean? And this kind of thing, which they do that very cynically so that you can't, say to try to undermine the idea that supporting the troops means opposing the war and let them train on their base safe at home and not go off and get killed for nothing. They try to sort of co-opt the sentiment of sincere wishes for American soldiers with sincere wishes that the politicians get what they want out of whatever war they started for whatever reason. And you can already see people hiding behind that. I saw a lady on Twitter. It's funny, like the mental gymnastics, right? It is like obvious cognitive dissonance where she's like, just can't stomach all these people rooting for America to lose. It's like, wait a minute, man, I'm on Twitter all day. I don't see anyone saying, ha ha, America lose. Oh, good, Americans were killed or anything like that. No one's saying that. They're saying we shouldn't have done this. Oh no, look, consequences. Oh, that was saying she was quote tweeting someone who was saying, oh my God, our consulate got hit in Saudi. And then she takes that like that person is rooting for Iran and wants America to fall just because they're saying that they think we should not have done this. And like, I don't know, man. Maybe someone is really just that dim, or maybe that's just how they have to construct it in their own mind, and as like an arm or a defense against a good argument.
That's their way to
I think
shut
it's a
war opponents off every time.
Yeah.
I think it's a projection, to be honest. A lot of these people are in like a death cult themselves, and so they are actually rooting for people to die in the other end of this. And so they
Yeah.
assume that if you're against the mission, then that must mean you're rooting for us to die.
And look, I mean, I plead guilty, dude. When I was 15 was Iraq War One when I was in ninth grade. And I was so into it. And I wasn't raised Republican. It wasn't all like, oh, good, George Bush, our great hero, is doing this or whatever. Like everyone always thought of him as half the man Reagan was anyway. You know what I mean? So like it wasn't like that. But what it was the president says we can break the thou shalt not kill thing. Now we can blow up stuff. Supersonic jets, dropping high explosives, causing large explosions, Like, forgive me, I'm a heterosexual male. I want to see some shit blow up, man. And especially as a 15-year-old, and the president is handing us this moral license that this horrific violence is totally cool now. This is the caveat. This is the loophole in God's commandment to not slaughter each other, is that if you wear olive green and you're fighting for your country, then you can kill whoever you want. And I got to tell you, I did not give a damn about what happened to the Iraqi people. It's like, oh, they bombed a shelter or something. That sucks for them. You know what I mean? Like, I was saying, yeah, die civilians in your shelter, but I didn't give a damn. And the thing is I understand that basically my 15-year-old ninth grade mindset about Iraq War One, that's the way most people approach this stuff. I'm from here. I'm on the side of my country, my government, fighting whoever they're fighting against, and screw the other guys. And the president wouldn't be doing this if it wasn't the right thing. Why else would he do it if it wasn't necessary and important to do it? So it's, you know what I mean? It's, as they say, taking license, right? Taking liberties, getting away with,
Yeah, I was
because you
I was
have
in school
the
when they
ability
rolled the
to.
TVs out and showed the towers falling, and I saw the second plane hit while I was in school. So, like, yeah, I was definitely like in a rage. People were like, "We're gonna go over there. We're gonna make sand glow," and I was like, "Hell yeah, let's do it." And like I said, it wasn't until later that I really kind of started breaking out of the collective responsibility mindset. And it's so easy to kind of fall into that where, all of these guys are bad and all of these guys are the good guys. And then, like I said, you start seeing some of the stuff that comes out, the torture videos and stuff like that from Abu Ghraib and stuff, and you're like, yeah, that's not cool though. And then, as I dig more and more into it and as we see the effects, because my dad is a Marine, retired Marine. And so when I was, right after that, my dad left to go off to war, and a good 80% of my childhood, he was gone. And now I'm sitting here, looking at all of the effects of all these different wars. And it's like, I lost my dad for my whole childhood. And what did we gain? You know what I'm saying? Like, and my dad's a good dude. Like, he's a really good dude. And so, I lost something big there, for terrorists to run all of these countries, literally.
Yeah. And that's
So,
so crucial, man. They just underestimate that. People think, wow, we lost 7,000 guys in Iraq and Afghanistan. I mean, that's 45 minutes in World War II. And so, but they're not taken into account. You got to zoom in, man. All those people, all those 7,000 people, and it's not just men, but again, moms too, and sisters and wives too. Um, and that doesn't include all the contractors that got killed, not all of them mercenaries, but a lot of other people who've died over there in the wars. But then all the people who just, as you're saying, who weren't there because they were somewhere else doing this when they should have been building their own families and building their own communities, building the economy of this country, and using all that brawn and all that brain power to produce goods and services and distribute them to people, improve people's standard of living. And to build America up. And the opportunity cost from the 10, or if you want to go back to the end of the Cold War, $20 trillion spent militarizing the Middle East. And the diversion of all of those men and women from proper pursuits to militarism. And you think about the geniuses, I mean, absolute 170 IQ, lunatic geniuses locked down in the bowels, basements of the Pentagon, designing and redesigning the same damn machine gun over and over again for a armored personnel carrier they're never going to deploy anyway, or whatever. Like, all of this is just a waste. And the effect that it has on your family and whatever, even the size of it. Maybe if he'd been there, you'd have more brothers and sisters, or, like, you know what I mean? Like, everything is changed. Everything is different because of that. And it's unfair. That we all learn in school, in government school, that what it means that it's a democracy is, in the we the people thing isn't just supposed to be like a slogan and whatever, is the government is made up of just citizens of the country. Nobody's claiming the divine right of kings here. We call him Mr. President, not your majesty, right? He's just a citizen like the rest of us, and same for the rest of them in power. And But then, so the ones who actually are in government then are supposed to be loyal to the rest of us, right? And the promise is that they do what they do because they have to, because, or at least they're doing their absolute best to do the right thing to protect the American people and our interests and whatever. And it's just so blatantly clear that that's not how it works. The special interests, meaning even foreign governments that come before the American people.
That's exactly what I wanted to ask you about. Yeah. So what's striking about all these things that you've said in criticism of the war, all 100% true, is how similar they are to what the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Dan Kane, according to leaks, told Trump right before the operation. He was talking about the interceptors. He was talking about there not being an exit plan. He was talking about how regime change is unrealistic. All these things were said directly to Trump before he decided to launch the attack. So why did he launch the attack anyway? Why did he do it anyway? And we even have reports that Steve Witkoff and Kushner torpedoed the talks intentionally. So there was apparently some attempt to go to war regardless of what the Iranians said, regardless of whether the United States could achieve what it wanted to achieve diplomatically. So why, in your opinion, did the United States do all this? It goes against any idea of the national interest.
Well, I only have a half-assed answer to that, which is that because he promised Netanyahu he would. But why did he promise Netanyahu he would? I don't know. I really don't know. And quite frankly, it doesn't make sense to me, right? Like just my intuition or whatever, that the Israelis are blackmailing him and are forcing him to do this. You know? I think everybody already knows everything they need to know about Trump's character. And there's no reason to think that he ever raped anybody or, certainly children or like any of these kind of things, like they say. Like if you told me that Bill Clinton was on that island raping young girls or like at least, teenagers or whatever kind of thing, I would believe you. Bill Clinton is a face biting rapist, scumbag, absolute sociopath, criminal. You know, Donald Trump, I think probably likes being a womanizer, you know what I mean? And would even like if somebody's bringing in, prostitutes from Eastern Europe or whatever, yeah, maybe, but underage ones and stuff like that, like where he's just outright committing felonies, he seems like he would protect his own ass better than that by exposing himself to that kind of trouble. I just don't think I think Trump is too jealous of all of his own power and wealth and whatever to get himself in that stupid of a situation. You know, somebody card her, make sure she's 22. You know what I mean? I don't know. But so I don't think it's that. I don't think it's that. But I think, what it is I think Netanyahu just convinced him that, look, man, you know, unlike all those other idiot presidents, you listen to me and you have helped me set everything up the way we want it. And like, okay, maybe October 7th was a setback, but then look, we use it as an excuse to crush Hamas, which let's be real, like Hamas isn't gone, but they got their asses beat really bad. You know what I mean? Same for Hezbollah. The Ba'athis in Syria are gone. We got Al Qaeda guys running Syria now, thank goodness, from Israel's point of view, marginalizing the Shiites. And so now, like, what's the point of doing the 6 countries in 5 years plan if you don't do the 7th? As Michael Ledeen, one of the chief neocons of the Bush era, would always say, faster, please. We have to go after the terror masters in Tehran. And in fact, Ariel Sharon said, look, I'll support the war with Iraq, which was really Netanyahu wanted it more than Sharon did. But Sharon said, look, but we got to go to Tehran too, because you could have Iraqi Shiites sort of lord it over Tehran, but just as likely, you could have Tehran really dominant among Shiite Iraqis because they're already a nation state and they're already prepared, and they're right next door and all that. So, and that's how it ended up playing out, was that, I even wrote a article in 2005 called "Could Bush Start Another War?" And it was about the possibility that he was going to realize that the only way to make Iraq right was to do Iran too. Then if you put Iran in power in Iraq, well, who cares if you go ahead and change the regime in Tehran? And that was the danger then. And there were forces pushing very hard for him to do it then. But I think that Netanyahu must have just convinced him that, look, man, these Ayatollahs, they suck. Like, haven't you hated them ever since the hostage crisis? Like, the baby boomers all still have this thing about the hostage crisis of 79. And you're the only guy who's brave and tall and wealthy and handsome enough and brave enough to do this thing. And now's your chance to do it. And this is the same kind of way that Bill Kristol was talking John McCain into, for example, wanting to put bombing Iran at the top of his agenda back when he was running for president. Was Bill Kristol told him, you know what, John McCain, you really remind me of Theodore Roosevelt. And John McCain was like, oh, swoon, I'll kill whoever you say, And like, I think there's the appeal of being great. In fact, I bet you Mark Thiessen told him this too, because did I not read a thing that said Mark Thiessen met with Trump? Mark Thiessen has a thing today. I saw it on the Twitter where he says Abraham Lincoln and Franklin Roosevelt are great presidents because they won their great giant wars. And Trump, if he succeeds in Iran, also will go down in history as one of America's greatest leaders we ever had. I mean, that article was written for Trump to read. He just subjected the rest of America to it too. But I think that's basically it, man. You want to be just another president? Or do you want to last long after you're dead? And here he is, he's building this giant arch of triumph in Washington, this giant monument to himself. Like, screw the American people. It's about him and his name in history. And I hate to say that because it's such a stupid ass answer. It's like when some numbnuts murders a great man. And it's like, it's not fair that it's that stupid of an answer. You know what I mean? And it's not always a lone nut, but sometimes it is. But I think that's got to be it, because he did know that he was taking a risk. As you said, there's nothing that the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff leaked to the Wall Street Journal that he didn't tell the president to his face. Mr. President, there are risks involved here. Okay, here's what could happen that would be outside of our ability to control, etc. And then Trump went ahead and took the big gamble anyway, like made the big risk anyway, guessed it would work out. I'm sure Pete Hegseth told him, yes, sir, can do, Mr. President. I mean, that is the military's job. The president wants you to kill something. You tell him, we'll figure out how to kill it, sir. Like, that's the job. You're not supposed to really tell him no that much. Like, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff is supposed to give counsel, right? He's not even literally in the chain of command, right? He's not between the Secretary of Defense and the chiefs, but he is the military's top advisor to the president. So they, and by the way, you started with this at the top of the show, these leaks. Rubio said this, it's maybe slightly out of context, but not exactly. But Rubio said this. And then the Speaker of the House also said essentially that Israel was going to go no matter what. And we decided we better not let them drag us into it. We better do this on our own timetable and whatever. And so that got a lot of mockery for like, oh, I had to hit the guy. Otherwise, he would have hit me back after I hit him. Or, something weird arguments. And people really like that because they're blaming Israel. And that's good. I like that too, because they're blaming Israel. And obviously it's Netanyahu who convinced Trump to do this. There's no question about that. But blackmailed him into doing it. Said, oh, I'm going to use a nuke. You can't hold me back. You better come with me because there's nothing you could do to stop me. So I'm doing, no way, dude. I don't believe that. He and Trump decided to do this together, And so I'm not taking away from the idea that, yeah, no, Iran did drag us into it, but not like that. It's more like they pushed us into it. You know what I mean? Rather than drag. And remember, last Thursday in Politico, when they reprinted this in the Jerusalem Post, wrote about it in the Jerusalem Post, they were telling the press, we might get Israel to start the war in the hopes that it'll provoke Iran into hitting American assets in response, and then leaving the president no choice but to join in the fight and be able to tell the American people, well, they attacked us, so we had no choice but to get in. And then they ended up going ahead and launching the thing a day and a half later anyway. But they put that in the paper on Thursday. Well, what we're thinking about doing is having the Israelis start the war in order to force Iran to attack our guys. And then we'll have an excuse to jump in. I mean, boy. And which just goes to show too that, like, isn't it funny how legality is the worst, like silliest of technicalities here? And, like, I'm not a fan of the United Nations as an institution whatsoever and all of that. But part of our signature to the United Nations Charter and our Senate ratifying it is a we agree that it's illegal to start a war. You can't start a war. And if you do, you got to at least get the agreement of the Security Council to authorize launching a war. Otherwise, it's a war crime. That's not what they mean when they say the liberal rules based order. This is what they mean when they say the liberal rules based order is we get to run roughshod over all these laws that we wrote for the rest of the world anyway, back after World War II mostly. And also it's the American Constitution says that Congress has the ability to, if you're going to start a war, only the people's representatives who have the responsibility and are accountable to the people in their local and state elections have the authority to get us into a war. And then the president has the authority to lead that fight. And anyone can read James Madison, making the principal author of the Constitution, making this perfectly clear that because the chief executive will be the one who has the most interest in having a he will not be the one in charge of deciding whether or not to have one. As simple as that, you know? And so they're completely in violation of that. And in fact, I saw there's this horrible pseudo, they call him, I think, a libertarian. I certainly don't, economist named um, is it Tim Carney, I think, who he wrote this thing about, man, it's wrong that the War Powers Resolution says the president can start a war for 60 days. Says he can defend us in war for 60 days. Says if he's going to start a war, he has to go to Congress and at least get authorization of not a declaration of war, but a delegation of the authority to him to decide. Basically, is how they've done it since Korea. And he says, it was just wrong that the War Powers Resolution says that the president can just go ahead and do this. And then he concludes the thread by saying, so Congress should declare war on Iran today. What? I don't know. Anyway, back to here's what's really crucial here, I think. They have no idea how to win this war or what to do or what. Like the best news that we got is that Donald Trump can just completely flip-flop and declare victory and stop the war right now. And go, yep, kill the Ayatollah, sank some ships, bombed some weapon stores, feeling really good about myself. And then okay, like what? I don't know. I don't know whether Iran's going to stop, but Trump could at least flip-flop on, at least he could say, I'm now minimizing my goals down to what I've already accomplished and we're wrapping this thing up, and then get on the phone with them and really try to say, hey, I am quitting. So you guys quit too, or that's going to really piss me off, but whatever, something, try to end it. He could do that. I mean, he's Mr. Flip Flop more than probably anybody ever, right? He just speak out of both sides of his mouth all day long about anything, and nobody even cares anymore. Everybody's so used to it now, like it doesn't even matter. Regime change, meme change, man. We just wanted to reduce their missile storage capability, or what? Fine, but if they're going to try to complete regime change, they can't, right? Okay, well, let me say, there's a very, very low possibility that they could. I guess if they have total air dominance over the country and they're just carpet bombing every government building in the country with B-52s and just doing everything they can to completely erase their conventional force and their entire, civilian, civil service, whatever infrastructure, everybody runs every dang bureaucracy, just erase the regime itself in terms of its physical institutions, just raising virtually everything to the ground or something. I guess there's a possibility that some group could seize power. But at that point, too, I mean, obviously, anyone who is involved in a major armed uprising against the regime now is working for America and Israel, are by definition guilty of the greatest treason of helping a foreign power attack their own country. And so then all of them are completely, to whatever degree they can even recruit these people, be jettisoning all of their own credibility the first time they pick up their rifles. And so, yes, America has, and can continue to back Kurdish communists like PJAK. And they say that they're trying to get the Barzani clan in, the Peshmerga in northern Iraq to join in. I don't know about that. Getting the sort of Iranian version of the PKK in Turkey or the YPG in Syria, those leftists to do it is one thing. But to get the Iraqi Kurdish Peshmerga to invade Iran, I doubt that. I'd like to, let me know when that's already happened, and then we'll agree that it happened. But then what? You're going to arm some Azeri groups. You're going to arm some Sunni Arabs, arm some some Baluchi Sunni groups and hope that they'll set off enough suicide bombs to somehow kill off the regime. And then none of these groups, the monarchy, going to parachute in a bunch of monarchist mercenaries, none of these groups would be able to take over the power of the country. So if it's pure speculation, whatever, but like just sussing it out, like what's the most likely result 6 months from now is there's one or another Shiite cleric is the supreme leader of the country. If they kill the next sixth, then they'll put in a seventh and
Yeah,
it'll be the same regime.
you're thinking a lot like Americans traditionally have. If you broke it, you build it. But the ones who are really running the show here are the Israelis. And I can tell you what they want and what their doctrine has been over the last few years. It's been not to replace anything, but to weaken things to the point of collapse. But
Yep.
all you have to do is look at their victims, right? Gaza is the best example. They kept Hamas in power intentionally, but like you said, after whooping their asses, keeping them at a minimum of power, but also creating all these little militias that are creating chaos there. In Syria, they're trying to do the same thing, not as successfully, but that's the goal. And now in Iran, what they want is either the Islamic Republic to not be able to function, to basically become a failed state. And all these little things that you're describing would be enough to make Iran sort of an inconsequential failed state. It's already on the way to there without completely replacing the regime. So Trump is talking in his last statements I saw, he was talking about changing the sort of policies of the regime, kind of like what he thinks he did in Venezuela. But the Israelis want to degrade it further. But no one's really talking about regime change. The differences between them aren't over that. It's about whether there'll be sort of a failed state or a chastened Islamic regime. But Israel is going full in on turning it into some Somalia, Libya, Gaza, that kind of thing.
Yeah. So, and by the way, I'm sorry, man. I have just been running ragged, and I think I saw some headline on my phone. I tried to forward it to myself, but I didn't read it. And I don't know that this was true, but I think I did see something where at least the White House was claiming that the Iranians were coming to them and wanting to negotiate on our terms, you know.
The other side is coming to them and they're refusing to talk.
Well, that
Which
was one report for sure. Yeah, that Iran said, no, we're going to keep blowing you up first before we're done.
Yeah, wasn't that in, like, Italy? They were talking through some proxies
Yeah.
they were trying to get them to stop the war, Trump was, and they just said no.
Yeah.
That's what I saw. That's what I was curious about was whether or not that was legit or if that's just reports or
Yeah, no, I mean, there was one report like that in the Israeli press, which I don't think anybody officially denied. It was in Ynet. So what was I going to say? Just that, look, in the scheme of things, we're not fighting Pashtun insurgency like Afghanistan or something like that. We're at war against a nation state. But see, American superpower based way over here in North America at war there. And, they do have the ability probably to activate sleeper cell types, even by just saying, hey, you are now a sleeper cell. If you believe in God, blow something up. If they're American Shiites who are, willing to go for that, that is a potential danger. But certainly they don't have the ability to bring war to the United States or to defeat the United States in war. But to hit each and every one of our bases in the Middle East, apparently they can do that. Um, and all they have to really do is survive this thing, right? They have to make this politically unpalatable for Trump to continue after we've lost so much equipment, so many bases, so much money, and so many men, and enough weeks have gone on or months or whatever it is. And the American people are finally sick of it and maybe even finally throw him out of power over it. Possible, although I guess unlikely, depending on how bad it gets. And, I think, well, they have the incentive to hang in there longer, I think, even at the cost of many of their own lives, in order to make this so much more difficult for the United States and politically disastrous for Trump. And because, the way the Ayatollah always did it before was he'd fire a couple of missiles at an empty corner of a base and say, hey, time out, just save a little bit of face. And then Trump went for that. Like right after he killed Soleimani and the Ayatollah responded by hitting a base in Iraq, Trump let him have the last word and said, okay, fair. And that was it. Some guys did get concussions, but no one was killed. And He's like, all right. So that was the way the Ayatollah did it last June, too. We dropped 14 bombs and destroyed their centrifuge facilities. He fired 14 missiles at an empty part of a base in Qatar, and he called beforehand as Trump thanked him. Thanks for calling beforehand and letting us know you're going to fire these missiles. And they shot them all down, or almost all of them. And the couple that got through hurt no one. And then so it was just like the slightest bit of face saving. Very conservative way of doing this thing. He's the same guy who said that God says you're not allowed to make nuclear weapons, that weapons of mass destruction, including chemical or germ weapons, are haram, forbidden. Well, they killed him. So now, essentially it's virtually guaranteed, right? Like if we were talking about decapitating the head of any government or any gang, you're virtually guaranteed to get a more radical replacement rather than a more compliant one, and almost certainly in this case. And by the way, here's how crazy this is, and I agree with you what you're saying about, well, the Israelis just want chaos here. But, the White House told the Wall Street Journal that, they really don't want to see Khamenei's son. They want to see Khomeini's grandson installed in power. He's kind of a moderate type. We think we could work with him. I swear to God, that's in the Wall Street Journal. They want Khomeini's grandson, the mean old Ayatollah from the 80s, the one who this guy's his handpicked successor. Now, we don't want the handpicked successor's son. We want the original guy's grandson. Get it straight, dude. This is, they're great thinking ahead. And what does that really reveal other than that we've talked to him and maybe even given him money and like him, right? You know what I mean? Like what that probably only hurts him if that's really what they want. But anyway, and then as far as the just break the place up and keep it at civil war, I wonder about that. I'm not an expert on the anthropology of ancient and modern day Persia, but I have every reason to suspect that all those different ethnic and sectarian groups that you can name are all Iranian patriots and probably are not willing to, go in with the United States and Israel and to commit high treason against their own country just for a little bit of money and guns and maybe or maybe not more influence in the new regime. Imagine during Barack Obama times that the Russians come and try to arm up right-wing militias to take on Obama. If you do, we're not going to do that. Nobody's going to do that. No one's going to fight against our own government on behalf of a foreign power, even if it was Hillary Clinton, right? I mean, there's
Well,
no
there are two groups that already are in arms, like the Baluchistanis, for example, were already fighting against Iranian security forces in this uprising. A lot of the protesters that they were talking about killing
Yeah.
were actually separatists, so that's a given that they're going to try to take advantage
But
of
is
this.
that the whole population, or that's just Jandala?
No, I don't know if it's the whole population. It's enough. Like, how do these separatist groups work? They terrorize their own populations
Yeah.
into supporting the uprising. It's not like they have to worry about public opinion. And then you're caught between the uprising and the government is hated. And of course, the Kurds have that long struggle for freedom, and now this is their only chance. They'll end up being stabbed in the back by the Americans, like everyone else. But those two groups are almost in the bag in terms of cooperating. How successful they'll be, I don't know. Other groups, you're right, they're probably less likely to do it. They're trying 5 or 6 groups, but those two, I can tell you, Israel is very optimistic that they'll be
Yeah.
able to work with them.
Yeah, I mean, and the Israelis, I don't know if you guys know this, and the great journalist Mark Perry had a story years ago in Foreign Policy about the Israelis posing as the CIA recruited Jandala to do all these head shoppings and suicide bombings. But, the Americans were in on it too, because part of it was there was this former DIA officer whose name is escaping me at this moment, who was involved in this too, who was, working for the DIA or I think he was a former DIA and DEA guy who ended up working for CIA running the thing. Anyway, but Mark Perry had a great one about the Israelis pretending to be CIA officers recruiting these guys and want to admit that they were from Israel directly. And in fact, Dan Rather interviewed one of the leaders of Jandala, like trying to launder him as a Jolani type. But yeah, they're head chopper, suicide bomber, total bin Ladenite kooks. So how far would they go? All the way. They'll blow
So I know
themselves up in front
you
of an
said you had
elementary
that
school.
runaway. Got a lot of stuff going on right now, and
Yes.
given everything that's going on, you're pretty high demand. One last question for you though.
Yeah.
Do you know anything about this new Ayatollah guy that has just been named? Like, what do we know about him?
All I
Is
know is
he
that
a
he's the
kook
son of
or
the
is
guy they just killed. Then they say he's a hardliner.
Much harder liner
probably
than
not?
Yeah. I mean, look, if for lack of a better word, one of the old Ayatollah Khamenei's virtues was that he was old, like really old. He was like 89. And so he just was not on some young man testosterone wounded honor thing. He's just a patient guy and a very conservative actor, at least in foreign policy. You know, he's always extremely cautious. And so there's no reason in the world to think the new guy's better than that. You know what I mean? It's just like when they wish for regime change in Russia. Do you get regime change in Russia? You might have H bombs going off over your capital city tomorrow. You should probably chill. You know what I mean?
I
Same thing
remember
here.
when
The
that
other
was
country
crazy.
attacked us. Yeah, some other country attacks us and changes our regime. You know what? You know, decapitation strike. Guess what? Meaner dudes are coming to power next. Guarantee. Yeah, this is just simple arithmetic, you know. So yeah, I would suspect the regime is going to last and that it's going to be much worse for everybody.
That's the most logical conclusion. All right,
Mm.
Scott, always a pleasure to have you on here. Thank you so much
Thanks,
for your
guys.
Always a
time.
pleasure, and we appreciate you making time.
Yeah, sure thing, guys. Appreciate you.
We'll see you next time.
See you next time.